My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 32 years old and I work as a marketing director at a tech startup in Austin, Texas. I'm Olivia Carter, and tonight should have been perfect. My 10-year wedding anniversary, our backyard in Austin lit by lanterns, friends gathered around a long oak table. My husband Mark raised his glass to me, eyes warm, until his phone buzzed and he shot me a look I couldn't read. My best friend Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, "Just breathe." The white chocolate wedding cake arrived, but when I lifted the cover, a strip of paper lay on top. "You can't be trusted." Heat flooded my cheeks. I glanced at Mark, nothing but confusion. Emma laughed nervously, trying to smooth things over, probably a prank. Later, at exactly midnight, the doorbell rang. No one was there. My heart hammered. Emma stood beside me on the porch, flashlight trembling in her hand. We heard soft footsteps retreating into the dark. And then I remembered the gift box from my in-laws, still unopened on the mantel. My pulse quickened as I peeled back the ribbon. I'm the oldest child of two driven professionals. My mom, Linda Carter, is a 35-year tenured history professor at the University of Houston. My dad, Tom Carter, just retired last year, after 40 years as a bank director. Growing up in their well-worn brick home on Rice Boulevard meant weekend debates over politics and impromptu lectures on American revolutions. Love it or leave it, that was their motto. My little brother Ethan, now 28, shot off to Denver right after college with his wife, pursuing a quieter life at a tech startup. By contrast, my husband Mark's family always felt a little performative. Mark, 35, works as a systems engineer at Innovate Tech here in Austin. His parents, Susan and Robert Livingston, relocated from Chicago when Mark was a kid, but never really let go of that windy city polish. His older sister, Sarah, 33, is a high-powered attorney in Dallas, and every holiday gathering inevitably turns into a subtle contest. Who has the higher bonus? Who's bought the bigger house? Who's making the smarter life decision? My own parents had clear expectations. Mom wanted me in a director role, like her professorship, by the time I hit 30. Dad craved me to take a leadership track in finance, preferably in Houston's banking circles. I rebelled by going into marketing at a tech startup instead, lured by the energy and creativity of small teams. Still, every family dinner growing up included side-eye when I described fun marketing campaigns. "You should be building something real," Dad would chide. On the very first Thanksgiving after Mark and I moved in together, my mother-in-law piped up about our modest mortgage, only $1,200 a month. She leaned forward, polished nails tapping her china plate, and murmured loud enough for the table, "I've always admired how cheap you two manage, but you know real homeowners invest at least twice that." The sting of that comparison stayed with me. I worked hard for that rental to mortgage buy-in, and she made it sound like I'd settled. Meanwhile, my own mom called every Friday night for our catch-up. She'd listen patiently as I vented about rush deadlines and client pitches, then remind me that intelligence and hard work would win out in the long run. Mark, though, sometimes got exasperated when I'd take these calls as late as 10 p.m. "Olivia, no one at Innovatech cares about your mother's opinion," he'd mutter, strained. The tension grew quietly at home, me torn between filial duty and my commitment to my marriage. Thus last month I got an accidental reply-all email from Sarah. It was addressed to Mom and Dad, and the subject line read, "Don't let Mark know about what happened in '09. My heart lurched. I stared at the line. We agreed to keep that part of the story under wraps, especially from Olivia's side. What story? I felt like someone had just yanked me off a ledge. I confronted Sarah over text, no reply. The next day, she pretended nothing had happened. The biggest relief more than anything has been my best friend Emma. We met in college at UT Austin over a shared obsession with vintage film posters. When I texted her that night, Sarah emailed my family about some secret, I don't even know what it is, She FaceTimed me instantly. Her bright blue hair was pulled into a messy bun. The cams showed her tiny apartment strewn with potted succulents. "Liv, you deserve better than this cloak and dagger BS," she said, eyes fierce. "You're the most transparent person I know. They're acting like you're the villain in your own life." Emma reminded me of all the times I'd championed her job hunt when she was stuck in retail, and how she'd stayed up writing thank you notes when my presentation blew up in flames. She told me this was a mark not of my weakness, but of their insecurity. If I were truly negligible, they wouldn't be whispering about me behind closed doors. Her unwavering belief lit a spark inside me. Maybe it was time to stop explaining and start demanding answers. That call with Emma ended with her rallying cry. "Tomorrow morning, let's meet at our favorite cafe, Kyoto's on South Lamar, and plan our next move. You're not alone in this." I hung up feeling oddly buoyant, as if the weight of unspoken expectations had shifted just enough for me to catch my breath. For the first time in months, I went to bed convinced that clarity, whatever it might look like, was on the horizon. In those quiet moments before sleep, I pictured our family dynamics like a chessboard, each parent, sibling, in-law moving their pieces in secret. But with Emma's support at my back, I felt ready to reveal the whole game, and finally play my own moves out in the open. That night, my phone buzzed at exactly 2:07 a.m. Groggy, I blinked at an unread text from an unknown number. "He's not the man you married. Check your backdoor camera footage." My heart thundered. I fumbled for the security app. There it was, buried under outdoor cameras, 2 grainy stills. Mark standing at our driveway, and then leaning into the passenger window of a dark sedan. The license plate was indecipherable. I shot back a, "Who is this?" But the silence that followed felt far more ominous than any answer. The next afternoon, desperate for clarity, I met Ethan at our favorite Cherrywood coffee shop. He sank into the booth looking as uneasy as I felt. I showed him the text and forwarded the cryptic email insisting I stay out of family matters that don't concern me. Ethan's guilt-ridden confession came in a whisper. "I saw him with someone. A blonde, outside that bar on South Congress. I thought maybe she was a coworker." My chest tightened at the thought of Mark leaning into a stranger's car at midnight. Reeling, I called my mom. Her reassuring tone wavered as I laid out the evidence, the camera stills, Ethan's admission, the pointed emails. After a long pause, she sighed. "Families have secrets, Liv. Maybe this isn't what it seems." I cut her off, only asking for one promise. If she heard anything more, she'd call me immediately. Hanging up, I felt the walls of our home press in, as if it too were conspiring to keep me in the dark. Later that day, I stumbled on a screenshot I'd never taken, a photo of Mark's arms wrapped around a blonde woman, time-stamped May 12, 10:47 p.m. How had it gotten into my album? Panic twisted in my gut. Just then, Emma appeared at my door with 2 steaming lattes. After I poured out the whole story, she pressed my phone into her hand and met my eyes steadily. "Tomorrow," she said. "We hit South Congress, we ask questions, trace that sedan and clean up those images. You're not going crazy. Something's happening and we're about to expose it." Her resolve steadied me. Wherever this trail led, I wouldn't walk it alone. That afternoon, I texted Mark and Susan an invitation to meet at our favorite cafe in downtown Austin, Blue Door Coffee, at 3:00 p.m. My hands trembled as I gathered the printed screenshots, the bar photo, and Ethan's voicemail on my phone. When they slid into the booth across from me, Susan's polite smile didn't reach her eyes, and Mark looked cornered. "I got a text accusing you of sneaking around," I began, sliding the camera stills across the table, "and my brother saw you hugging someone outside that bar on South Congress." Mark's jaw tightened. Susan cleared her throat before reaching for her latte. "Liv, you're overreacting. Maybe it was a client," she offered, voice syrupy calm. Tap the bar photo onto the tabletop. Explain this, then. Mark swallowed and shook his head, eyes darting to the customers around us. That's ridiculous, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I was grabbing a late-night coffee. She's an intern at Innovatech who needed a ride. An intern? I pressed, heart pounding. At midnight, in a sedan I don't recognize? My voice caught as I pulled out my phone and cued the audio recording, his voice, admitting, I needed someone to talk to about work, just a friend. Mark's face flamed. You secretly recorded me, he snarled. Susan shot me a reproachful glance, but I refused to back down. Just then, the door jingled and Marcus, my neighbor from 2 doors down, walked in. He glanced at our table, then strode over. Olivia, sorry to interrupt, he said quietly, voice steady. I saw you had questions about that sedan. I got the plate through a traffic camera yesterday. It belongs to a woman named Cassidy Monroe. He tapped his phone to show me the lookup result. My breath hitched. Mark's eyes widened. Cassidy is not who you think she is, he sputtered. She's a friend from college. Susan scoffed. A friend who drives a borrowed car at night? I shook my head. Or maybe she's part of some family cover-up, I muttered, recalling Sarah's email. My phone buzzed, a group chat notification from Livingston Carter family. Sarah had added everyone. Subject, don't discuss this here. The message read, Stop causing drama, Olivia. This stops now. I exhaled, looking from Mark to Susan. No more secrets, I said firmly. I want the full story, now. Mark opened his mouth, but before he could lie again, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. You're a rock star. Whatever happens next, I've got your back. It was exactly the boost I needed. I squared my shoulders and leaned in. Okay, I said. Let's start telling the truth. That evening, I barely made it through my front door before the ache in my chest swallowed me. My legs gave out, and I slid down until my back hit the cool hardwood floor. The printed screenshots and my phone clattered beside me as tears blurred my vision. Every betrayal, every secret, every half-truth I'd unearthed crashed over me like a tidal wave. I curled into myself, arms wrapped tight, and let the sobs come. Through the blur, I opened messages and dialed Kate, my college roommate in New York, the one who always knew exactly what to say. Her voicemail picked up. I left a shaky breath. Kate, it's me. Everything's falling apart. My voice cracked on the last word, and I crumpled further. I hung up, convinced I'd wake up from this nightmare, only to realize the room was just as empty. After a long moment, my phone pinged with a reply from Kate's group chat. Liv, you okay? Call me when you can. I gasped out a text. Not okay, please call. Almost instantly, her FaceTime rang. I answered, and her concerned face filled the screen. Oh my God, Liv, what happened? I choked out the story. Mark's evasions at the cafe, Susan's gaslighting, Marcus's plate lookup, and finally, that group chat warning from Sarah. Kate listened in silence, eyes widening. When I finished, my knees shook so badly I nearly fell off the sofa. Liv, she said softly, this is a lot. Anyone would crumble under all that. But you're not alone. We'll handle it, I promise. Her calm steadied me slightly. Just then, another notification flashed on my screen, an email from that unknown address, the same one that sent me the midnight text. I opened it with numb fingers. The subject line read, I can help. The body contained a single sentence and an attachment. I've been where you are. Let me guide you through the evidence you need. Check the PDF. I hesitated, heart pounding. The attachment was labeled Proofs PL. My instincts screamed both scam and lifeline. I tapped to download. Inside were redacted screenshots of more text messages, dates highlighted, and a list of phone numbers. Numbers I didn't recognize, but one caught my eye. Austin Surveillance Services. Underneath was an address. I looked back at Kate. Kate, someone's sending me evidence I didn't ask for. Is this legit? I don't even know who they are. She frowned. If they know about the family group chat and Mark's texts, they're either a friend or someone else tangled in this. But that surveillance company, it could be worth checking out. Maybe they recorded more than your front door cam. Tears pricked again, this time from a spark of hope. I don't know if I can do this alone, I admitted. You won't, Kate said firmly. I'll fly in tomorrow morning. We'll go together. My chest tightened with gratitude and relief. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat in the dim living room, the PDF open on my lap. The numbers and notes danced before my eyes. I scribbled them on a notepad. Phone numbers for low-cost skip tracing, the surveillance address, a name I'd never heard, Elena Torres. I pressed my forehead into my hands. My vision was double from crying, but my mind was suddenly electric with purpose. No longer would I simply react. I would plan. I would fight. I checked the clock. 10:17 p.m. Tomorrow at dawn, I'd drive to that office, armed with Marcus's plate info and these new leads. I'd call those numbers, track who'd sent the email, and, if I had to, even subpoena records. The weight on my shoulders felt lighter somehow, as if transforming panic into strategy had cracked the dam of despair. Before bed, I texted Emma and Marcus together. Big move tomorrow. Can you both meet me at 8 a.m. at the surveillance office on East 7th? Within seconds, Emma replied, On my way, and Marcus wrote, I'll be there, sending you anything else I can find. A small army was forming. As I lay down, exhaustion pulled me under, but instead of drowning in fear, my last coherent thought was that I'd reclaimed a sliver of control. For the first time in days, I drifted towards sleep with a plan, proof that even in my darkest collapse, I could rise again. The next morning I slipped out of the house before the sun had fully risen, the cool summer air of Austin clearing the fog from my mind as I tied my sneakers and set off for Zilker Park. The trail was quiet save for birdsongs overhead and the distant hum of bicycles, familiar comforts that steadied my racing heart. When I reached the little bridge spanning Barton Creek, I paused to catch my breath and remind myself that yesterday's collapse would fuel today's climb. By the time I ducked into Quixote's Cafe on South Lamar, the scent of freshly ground coffee felt like a promise of possibility. I ordered an iced mocha and laid out my notebook on the table, scrawling in bold letters, Meet Elena Torres at Austin Surveillance Services at 8. Call the Skip Trace hotline, dig into Cassidy Monroe's background, and monitor any unfamiliar emails. As I drafted my plan, a stray coffee receipt tumbled from my shirt pocket, revealing a small, folded yellow note in handwriting I recognized without seeing a signature. My dear granddaughter, remember our adventure at Kingston Rock Trail. You are stronger than you know. When the path gets rocky, seek the secret at the end of the trail. Postmarked 1992, from Grandma Margaret, the note felt like a talisman. I closed my eyes and pictured her pointing out the boulder engraved with courage deep in Wharton State Forest, her way of teaching me that resilience was born of turbulence. Tucking the note into my notebook, I felt a surge of determination, as if her voice were walking me forward. By 7:50 a.m., Emma's text buzzed in. Here at Surveillance Services, where are you? I dashed to my car, fumbled a quick call to Marcus, who'd already uploaded extra alley cam footage for me, and sped down East 7th. At Austin Surveillance Services, Emma greeted me with a supportive grin and a coffee to go. Inside, Elena Torres, with her platinum bob and calm professional air, queued up the night's footage. At 10:05 p.m., Marcus stepped out of our sedan and leaned in close to a woman. By 10:17, she was walking off with another man. When I asked for her name, Elena printed a still, Cassidy Monroe, crystal clear. She offered to prepare an official report or affidavit if I needed. On the drive home, relief washed over me in equal measure with vindication. I called my lawyer to set up a meeting and forwarded Elena's files directly, video clips, high-resolution stills, everything. Emma cheered as our favorite upbeat playlist blared through the speakers. For the first time in days, I laughed out loud to the beat. That afternoon, I drafted an email to the entire family. I have collected conclusive evidence. Tomorrow at our meeting, I will share the surveillance footage and photos. There will be no more secrets or half-truths. I glanced at Grandma's yellow note, now tucked beside my keyboard, and whispered, "You were right. Courage is waiting at the end of the trail." With that courage fueling me, I finally felt ready to face whatever came next, and to reclaim my story on my own terms. I sent a formal invitation to both families, requesting a meeting at my parents' home in Houston for that Sunday afternoon. When the day arrived, I arrived early to set up the living room. Elena's printed stills and a laptop cued to the surveillance video on one side, and a neatly stacked pile of Mark's incriminating text messages and receipts on the other. My heart pounded as Susan, Robert, Sarah, Ethan, and even Grandma Margaret took their seats. I began without preamble. "Thank you all for coming. I'm here because I've gathered evidence that can no longer be ignored." Clicking my remote, the video played. Mark exiting our car at 10:05 p.m., speaking intimately with Cassidy Monroe, then watching her walk off hand in hand with another man. The room fell silent. Even Dad's habitual throat clear paused mid-gesture. Next, I projected a slideshow of text exchanges. Mark's messages arranging secret meetups, Sarah's group chat admonitions to stop stirring drama, and Susan's veiled comparisons when we celebrated milestones. Gasps fluttered around the room. Sarah's eyes widened. Grandma covered her mouth. Mark's face went pale. I let the silence settle before I continued. I offered everyone the chance to be honest. Instead, I was dismissed, gaslit, and threatened. But families shouldn't operate in the shadows. That ends today. I handed copies of the evidence to a stunned Robert. "I'm proposing we work through this honestly, openly, together. I'm willing to attend family counseling at the Austin Family Center, and I want all of us to commit to transparent communication." Susan sniffed, eyes hard. "Liv, this is dramatic." But Dad intervened, his voice low and measured. "She's earned the right to speak, Susan." Sarah's shoulders slumped. Ethan glanced guiltily at the floor. Just then, Grandma Margaret, who had quietly observed, rose and addressed the room in her calm, commanding timbre. "Olivia has shown courage. Betrayal can fracture trust, but truth is the path to healing. I support her choice to make this family whole." Her words felt like a benediction. Marcus, who'd driven in from Austin, stepped forward. "I've also confirmed through independent witnesses that Cassidy Monroe isn't a client or an intern. She's Mark's former co-worker, now friend, and he kept that detail hidden." He handed me a witness statement on letterhead. Mark's jaw clenched. He swallowed and exhaled fully. In that moment, I saw the shift. The same people who conspired against me now sat exposed, but attentive. I closed the laptop and looked around. "This isn't about punishment," I said softly. "It's about rebuilding. If you accept my offer, we move forward together. If not, I will make these records public and pursue legal action." My voice was steady, no quiver of doubt. A long pause ensued, then Sarah spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I was wrong to protect Mark." Susan's eyes glistened. Robert nodded firmly. Ethan reached across and took my hand. In that charged silence, I realized I'd reclaimed the narrative. By the time the meeting broke, we had an agreement. Weekly family check-ins, professional counseling, and full transparency moving forward. As I stepped onto the porch afterward, Grandma Margaret caught my arm. "You did well, child. Truth takes courage. I inhaled the humid Houston air, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. I had turned the tables, and for the first time, our family faced the future together, on equal ground. Years before my own whirlwind with secrets and betrayals, Grandma Margaret took me on what she called the grandest adventure of my childhood, a hike along Kingston Rock Trail in Morton State Forest, New Jersey. I was 8, wiggling my toes in new hiking boots too stiff to bend comfortably, and Grandma strode ahead in her worn leather boots, humming an old folk tune. At one point she stopped before a great gray boulder jutting from the trail and encouraged me to place my small hand on its surface. Carved into the rock was a single word: courage. She knelt beside me and whispered, "Whenever life feels too heavy, remember that courage rests in unexpected places." That afternoon, I watched her pull a crumpled leather-bound journal from her pack. Its yellowed pages chronicled decades of hikes, storms weathered, and unlikely kindnesses from strangers on lonely trails. On one page she'd sketched the same boulder and written, "Storms remind us what lies beneath our strength." She closed the journal with a satisfied nod, instructing me to add my own entry someday. Fast forward to last week. When I found Grandma's yellow note tucked in my jacket, I realized she was leaving me a fragment of that same journal wisdom. In my chaos, her message served as a compass, pointing me back to a lesson learned long ago: that true resilience often emerges at the far end of hardship. But here's the twist. Buried within Grandma's journal was another entry I'd never noticed, dated 20 years ago. It described her first confrontation with betrayal, her own sister's meddling in family matters, and how she finally demanded transparency, much like I did in Part 7. In the margin, Grandma had sketched a tiny key and written, "Unlock the door to truth, even when it trembles." Discovering this secret note felt like a direct handover of family legacy, a reminder that courage and honesty are traditions worth preserving. In those quiet moments, I understood that my side story wasn't just a nostalgic detour. It was a living example of how past generations forged the very tools I needed: resilience, clarity, and the conviction to turn the darkest twists into stepping stones. In the weeks following our family meeting, the repercussions rippled far beyond Houston. First came the news that Mark's project at Innovatech had unraveled under the weight of his secretive behavior. His supervisor, having seen the surveillance footage I'd provided, concluded that Mark violated company ethics by misusing corporate trust and engaging in unauthorized off-the-clock meetings. Within days, Mark was stripped of his lead engineer title and docked a substantial performance bonus, nearly $5,000, withheld as a penalty for his undisclosed conflicts of interest. The press release stressed Innovatech's commitment to transparency and integrity, a not-so-subtle rebuke of his actions. Sarah's own downfall arrived more quietly but no less humbling. After witnessing the fractured trust in our family, her law firm quietly reassigned her from high-profile corporate cases to pro bono community work. Participation in monthly Rebuild Trust workshops became part of her performance review, and she was required to co-lead a seminar on ethical communication for junior associates. On the firm's internal message board, a respectful note appeared under her profile. "Sarah Livingston demonstrates accountability by sharing her lessons learned. Join her session on reparative dialogue next Wednesday." It wasn't the courtroom victories she once coveted, but Sarah seemed to embrace it as a path to genuine growth. Back home, our weekly family check-ins evolved into a structured family town hall. We gathered each Sunday evening, my parents, Mark, Sarah, Ethan, and even Susan and Robert, in Grandma Margaret's cozy den, the one lined with her travel souvenirs. We'd start with a gratitude round. Each person named one positive action they'd taken that week. Sarah admitted how awkward it felt to co-present ethics training and thanked us for holding her accountable. Mark confessed he'd lost more than his title. He'd risked the trust of the person he loves most. Every confession was met with quiet nods and supportive murmurs. One evening, Grandma Margaret surprised everyone by bringing out an old family photo album. She flipped to a picture of my grandmother and her estranged sister standing in front of that Kingston Rock boulder. "Betrayal wounded me deeply," Grandma began, voice steady. "But holding on to anger would only fracture my own heart." She passed around a small keychain, carved with the word trust, encouraging each of us to carry it as a reminder. In that moment, the last of our collective defenses dissolved. Even Susan dabbed at her eyes. By the time Mark and Sarah stood before a small gathering at the Austin Family Center, where they co-led a workshop on healing through honesty, their transformation was palpable. Instead of defensiveness, they spoke candidly about the fallout of secrets, and instead of legal jargon, they shared personal anecdotes of remorse and hope. Attendees, many of whom had walked through their own family crises, approached them afterward with gratitude and tears, reinforcing that true leadership sometimes springs from humbling defeats. Through it all, I watched not just their punishments but their genuine tug toward redemption. The family bond, once stretched thin by lies and half-truths, now bore the weight of shared vulnerability. And as I stood in the back of that workshop, listening to Sarah guide a couple through an exercise in mutual apology, I realized that the greatest antagonist had never been Mark or Sarah. It was the silence and secrecy we allowed. Once we confronted that true adversary, everyone's downfall became an opportunity for collective ascent. By the time Emma's 4th birthday rolled around, our once fractured family had learned to celebrate in a new light. We gathered at Zilker Park, balloons bobbing against the Texas sky, picnic blankets spread in a circle, and laughter weaving through the oaks. My parents brought homemade lemonade, Ethan juggled hot dogs on the grill, and even Susan and Robert had tossed their reservations aside, arriving with a strawberry rhubarb pie. As Emma tore into her courage-themed cake, complete with tiny fondant boulders, I watched my family lean into one another, sharing stories of setbacks turned into strengths. It wasn't perfect, Mark still hesitated when he hugged me, but it was real, and that authenticity tasted sweeter than any anniversary celebration we'd ever hosted. At the end of the day, as the sun dipped low, Mark presented me with an unwrapped canvas hidden behind his back. On it was a sunrise over Ladybird Lake, painted in soft pastels, with the single word "Begin" scripted in flowing letters across the sky. My throat tightened. The painting was our path forward, a visual promise that today's endings seed tomorrow's starts. With tears I thanked him, knowing the road ahead would still hold bumps, but also that we had the tools, truth, empathy, and courage to navigate them. A week later, our family group chat buzzed with new plans. A joint vacation to San Diego that fall, timed with Grandma Margaret's 80th birthday. Sarah volunteered to coordinate accommodations, while Dad insisted on renting a beach house big enough for all of us. We laughed as Mark teased Ethan about packing his surfboard, and Grandma even suggested a courage hike in Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve. The old script of secrecy had been replaced by a fresh narrative, one where each voice mattered, and each story found a place in the collective journey. If there's one lesson I've learned from this roller coaster, it's that family drama doesn't end with one confrontation or a tidy courtroom victory. Healing is a process, a messy, beautiful unfolding that requires honesty to tear down the walls we build, and compassion to hold each other steady while we rebuild. True courage, I realized, isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to face it head-on, together. So to anyone watching our story, lean into the discomfort of difficult conversations, make space for vulnerability, share the unsent emails, the hidden recordings, the truths you've tucked away. Because only when light floods the shadows can trust grow strong roots. And remember, every ending is just the first stroke on a new canvas. It may start with a single word, begin, but it unfolds into a masterpiece of resilience, love, and renewal.